I've been looking forward to this conversation. Sanjeev is, as you heard, he's on the Prime Minister Modi's Economic Advisory Council. He also has been in the investment banking world, where he was the chief strategist at Deutsche Bank, written numerous books, including his most recent Revolutionaries, which Amazon is making a series on, which is super cool. And he's wrote extensively about the future of education, how AI is going to disrupt learning, and the opportunities and the risk along with that. So to start, maybe we put a framework around this. The title of this conversation is Potential and Perils, about AI in education. I call it risk, rewards, and the regulation. But why don't you create a framework, if you would, for the conversation we're about to have, how you think about that.
So, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to all of you. Michael, the most important thing that's happening, which is happening whether we like it or not, and it's already very visible, is that AI is basically means the end of the college lecture. It's simply not worth our while to go and listen to the average college lecturer drone on for an hour and answer a few questions. AI can simply do it better and also answer our questions. In fact, every time I write a paper, within about a couple of hours, somebody publishes a podcast in my voice online, which explains the paper better than I myself can. And then it already is the case that the same system can, I haven't got a podcast that does Q&A, but the technology exists. So it's just a matter of time before somebody actually completely creates a avatar of mine, and it kind of takes over. So in that sense, the way we give out education in the lecture format, which is still the dominant format of giving out education, at least for anything from the higher end of high school, and certainly through most of university, till you come to something very specialized at the PhD level, that entire chunk is actually basically outdated. And I personally cannot see how we will not have to completely restructure this. Now, I understand there are exceptions to this. Maybe I can't teach surgery in this particular format, and there must be other subjects that you can't teach in this format. But for a very large part of education, or the system of education, you can now essentially automate it. And this means there are huge advantages to this. I know that lecturers and academics may not quite like this, I don't know. But it does have huge advantages. First of all, you can learn at whichever speed you want. We can, at least in theory, get rid of expensive college education completely, because the same lecture can be heard anywhere for essentially no incremental cost. We can now also similarly test comprehension at any point in time at no incremental cost, and much better than a human being could do in a consistent basis. All of this is available in technologies that already exist or will exist very, very shortly. So now the question here is, what is the downside of this? And there are some downsides. I understand there will be some problems. For example, universities play a role, for example, in acculturization. Now, in a system that is broken down into everybody sitting in front of a computer and listening to some AI bot, then clearly other forms of acculturization will have to be devised. I'm not saying it can't be done. After all, university education is, in its current form, is only a 20th century creation. People before that used to acculturize themselves in other ways, through religious groups, YMCA, football, or whatever it is. people will find other ways of doing it. So I don't think this is what will save universities at all. I'm just saying that this will change. But the downside of this, and this is where we will have to put some thought in, not so much in the sciences, but certainly in the social sciences and very much in the humanities, is the potential of monoculture, in that the AI-generated systems become infected with certain ideological or preconceived notions, and they perpetuate them. This does not, of course, mean that non-AI systems don't do it. I mean, go to any US university, it is incredible how ideologically uniform US or now UK universities are. So all of this is going to happen, as I said, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, and I like to say, in the United States, we have 4,000 universities, but there's one opinion. And so to your point, I mean, that already exists, and that is a risk of AI. Just reinforce that in kind of hyper-scaled way. Talk about what that means for the institution itself. What do you see the future of the university to be, with the function that it plays? I think we talk about, you know, basically old knowledge is being commoditized by AI. What is that? What kind of opportunity is there for the university?
So the university will have to completely reinvent itself. I mean, whenever I make this point about AI and lectures, etc., somebody will always say, yes, but you know, universities are about our memories and, you know, hanging out at the college bar or whatever it is. I said, yeah, so just create a gigantic cafe, give everybody free coupons, much cheaper than going to university. If that's what universities think is going to save them, then it's not going to happen. Nobody's paying large amounts of money to spend huge amounts to sit around, you know, in a cafe. So university is not going to be saved by the cultural aspect of it. People find other ways of doing it anyway. So my own sense is that there are two things that universities will do or need to do. One is the creation of new knowledge, research and development. So I think universities will become increasingly about finding new frontiers of knowledge. And so interestingly, their competitor will not be other universities, but private R&D labs or government R&D labs or other spheres that allow new knowledge to be created, think tanks, all kinds of other spaces which create new kinds of knowledge. So research and development, but as I said, this is not a space where it will be exclusively theirs. There'll be other people doing it. The other will be certification, but again, do you need, you know, large, sprawling campuses for doing certification? No. But still, some credentialized system will exist. Universities that are able to create systems of testing will find, and that are accepted by others as signs that they have understood something. They will exist. There will be certain areas that will continue to do well. I think medicine is an obvious one, but things that require your hands to be dirtied in some fashion, I suppose those kind of institutions will exist. And completely new things may happen, who knows? Many universities have become hubs for innovation. Maybe that's what universities will be. They will basically be hubs for basically startup hubs. All kinds of new things will happen. I'm sure institutions will evolve, but universities as we know it, I can see in my lifetime will cease to exist.
And to talk about the certification role that universities play and how AI, I mean, it's this kind of artifact of a degree that sort of signals this type of background. But can AI do a much better job of providing more precise information, what somebody's capabilities are, what their skills are?
As I said, not in things that require you to do things like surgery. But yes, as it turns out to be. AIs, if properly calibrated, are actually more consistent in marking papers, as it turns out to be. They're better at reading handwriting, as it turns out to be. If they're, again, properly calibrated, they can have less ideological biases than human beings, because you need to only fix it at the top, and then the whole system can do it. Whereas for human beings, you have to fix that for every individual lecturer. So there are things that AI can simply do better. What it may not be able to do, again, linked to my point about new areas of knowledge, is to be able to deal with non-standardized ways of thinking. Because AI, what is AI doing really, at least the way AI exists today? It is basically mining information in various ways. It's not doing first principle thinking. So if I came up with a completely radically new way of thinking about something, AI would definitely mark me down.
Exactly.
Yeah, but sadly, that is what most conventional human teachers do. I know this from personal experience. Growing up through school, both high school and university, of course I did this deliberately. I insisted on solving problems in ways that were different than the one that was expected, just for the fun of it. And I found, almost always, my professors found that extremely difficult. And they, I mean, of course, I knew I would be marked down and I would take it back to them and show them that my system was just as legitimate as theirs. That was what I was aiming for anyway. But I'm just telling you that you won't have the opportunity to do that with AI. AI just won't understand what on earth you're doing.
No, and I think that is the opportunity, how to think critically, how to think creatively, and come up with different ways to evaluate things. Talk about the regulatory challenges. You talk about the United States maybe having too much of a laissez-faire attitude. Europe might be too strict. How do you think about threading that needle to have the right framework so India can thrive?
So I'm going to break away from AI just as an educational tool. AI is a much bigger entity and development. And the fact of the matter is, AI will, in fact, in many cases, already beginning to do things that are not within normal human capability. There are, of course, individuals who can still, keep up with it, but there will be a time that it's just too exhausting to do it. And of course, we are lazy people. If we have a tool that is doing most of the regular things, we will get out of the habit of doing it. I mean, it already is the case that, for example, my kids' generation don't know how to use the gear shift, even though during their driving test they did train for it, but a few weeks later they don't know, and now they basically don't know how to use a gear shift car. So this is what will happen, I can see, with many of the teaching skills and even evaluation skills after a while, in that we will have automated it. Now, this will happen in many other things. We will automate all kinds of things. And because AI is not just working in a silo, but is talking to other AIs as well, because that's what makes it genuinely convenient, at some point in time, we will have given up too much of our lives over. When that happens, when you have one integrated system, it is then prone to massive systemic breakdowns. Now, if you think I'm just kind of thinking sci-fi, just look at what happened last July. One single line of code which was wrong caused banks to stall, airlines to stall, all kinds of things to happen just last July. Right? And it was a static piece of code. It wasn't even in the Microsoft system. It was actually a patch that they had put, and there was one line of code that was wrong, and it had all kinds of unintended consequences through the system. Now, imagine this with something that is like a virus and evolves. In fact, I mean, you don't need it to have consciousness in order for it to, begin to do bad things. So the point I'm making here is we do need to find a way to curtail it in various ways. And I'm not going to summarize this, but I've written extensively on this. I've even published a paper about a year ago in the Prime Minister's Economic Council about how to regulate AI. Now, there are currently 2-3 ways in which AI is being regulated. One is basically self-regulation, which is what the US does. This is laissez-faire. And in these kinds of things, as you know, the competitive pressures mean that, at some point people will stretch beyond what is sensible. But that's what the US and the UK are doing. They are allowing companies to basically self-regulate. And I can, that's obvious that that could be a train wreck. Less obvious is the problem with the European Union. The European Union is using bureaucratic risk measures to decide what is dangerous AI behavior and not dangerous AI behavior. Now, this may sound like a sensible thing to do. But the problem is, artificial intelligence is a complex adaptive system. It's evolving. The bits of AI that are dangerous may look completely benign today. They may infect something else, which then infects something third. You're creating an interconnected system. The ability of European bureaucrats to work out the unintended consequence of this evolving system is, my view, probably even worse than that of the American system. The American system, at least, has a tort law system, i.e., if a particular company does something particularly bad, you can essentially sue it for billions of dollars. So there's a big hammer that can come for you if you behave badly. So in some sense, tort laws do provide, even in a self-regulatory environment, tort laws provide some break. In a bureaucratic system, when there is systemic failure, you can't blame anyone. And so what will happen is that this problem will keep perpetuating till it really blows things up. So I personally think that the European system is actually more dangerous. And then there is, of course, the Chinese system, which is that the state knows everything. Now, we know what happened in Wuhan. I don't really think that the Chinese state will be able to do a better job with an AI virus than it was able to do with the COVID virus. So something like that escaping would also cause all kinds of problems. So what is it that I'm advocating? That is basically what you were trying to come to. So I'm advocating that, first of all, we as the human race need to take a call on a few things. First of all, I think we need to give up on the idea of Internet of Everything. We need to create walls between different uses and be willing that from time to time, bits of it will fail, but at least the whole thing will not fail at the same time. So create deliberate firewalls between different uses of AI. Don't even attempt an Internet or AI of everything. Second, introduce norms which we now use on other complex adaptive systems like financial systems on artificial intelligence. For example, insist on regular audits of explainability. Now, this is not difficult to do. Every company that comes up with a product has to, on a regular basis, explain the results their AI system is generating. Not too much to ask. Two, we can insist that there are certain triggers where they have to ask for human sign-offs in order to get to the next stage. So basically, create various layers where human beings have to essentially sign off on some process. And so on and so forth. So many of these things have parallels in financial regulation. We insist on many of these things from companies, for audits, and so on. And very, very importantly, insist on skin in the game, which, by the way, I'm borrowing from the tort law idea, which is that make sure ex ante you decide that when AI does something bad, who is the person who pays for it? Because otherwise what will happen, the guy who made the code will blame the guy who gave the guy who gave the data will blame the survey, meanwhile something else will happen, somebody will blame the final user for doing something. You have to be clear who is to be blamed for bad outcomes. Skin in the game, therefore, is very, very important. I've given you some whole bunch of, I don't want to turn this into a monologue, but there's a whole bunch of things. You can Google this up on the Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister's website.
So talk about, AI is obviously wildly disruptive to the future of work. What jobs do you see most impacted negatively? What jobs do you see most impacted positively? And net, do you see it being an advancement for opportunities, employment opportunities?
So the most important thing about technology is nobody knows. This is also true of those who invent those technologies. So, don't think that just because, people have invented a particular technology, they know exactly what on earth it's going to be used for. They don't. Those who invented social media at least claimed, when it first came on the stage 20 years ago, that social media was actually going to push everybody into the middle because now everybody in the world could talk to everybody else, and why would you have these extreme, outlandish views? But in fact, what it did is created echo chambers. All tribes managed to find themselves. Now you didn't have to be nice to the guy in the next cabin because you had now found some fellow traveler in the other side of the world, and you could really continue to be an echo chamber. So what I'm trying to say is that just like social media led to unintended consequences, so will AI. So I have no idea where this is headed, nor do I know what jobs it will create. For the simplest reason, who would have known that social media influencer was going to be a career option? Yeah. So I have no idea. So as far as those of you who are trying to get into education using AI to think about future generation jobs, let me say that going back to old style universities are going to find this really difficult because, by the time the Committee on Curriculums has managed to clear the curriculum has moved on. So this is not going to work. It makes it possible for smaller institutions, universities or otherwise, to be able to very quickly come up with new training modules for things that do not exist today but will appear in the horizon all of a sudden and require large numbers of people. So it's an opportunity for the nimble. But it also means one important thing, which is that we will have to really rethink higher education in a very, very fundamental way. And let me explain this. Today, the way the higher education is set up is the following. So we go through till 18, you're in school, and then after that, you spend 3 or 4 years at university. If you want to do postgrad, another 2 years, and then a PhD if you really go that far. But basically, by the age of 25, you have gained all the knowledge that you're supposed to have, and then you're supposed to spend the next 35 years till the age of 60, presumably when you retire, applying all that knowledge. Now, what happens as a result of this is that the guys at the peak of the system, i.e. the 55, 60-year-olds, people of our generation essentially, are the most outdated people in the system and taking the most important decisions. Now, this has got to be the most absurd system, right? So this way of education surely can't go on. You will have to create a way in which people go back to university all the time. In fact, it may be a waste of time spending 4 years in the beginning, but in fact, spend 2 years. Then work for a while, go back and do another year somewhere along the way, and then you accumulate credits, maybe while working, you get your degree and certification along the way. Maybe those won't be called bachelors and masters, etc. We'll have new names for them. But effectively, this whole system that we have of bachelors, masters, PhD, these are 19th century mechanical ideas of how education progressed. In a fluid system, you cannot have this system. And so we have to be all prepared that we may learn all kinds of things along the way, go back to university. Going back to university may not even be going to university physically, but doing it online. It may mean that we may start out being accountants and end up being physicists. I don't know. But a lot of us will do these kinds of things. Well, I personally think it's a positive thing. I personally do a whole bunch of different things, so I kind of can see the joy of it. But, those of you in here who really wanted to be astronauts, who knows? Maybe some of you will get the opportunity to do that.
I have so many things I want to talk to you about, and we're out of time. But before we leave the stage, you do need to just share. I mentioned at the beginning how your book, Revolutionaries, is being made into an Amazon series. Give a quick update on that and what people can look forward to.
So this is my book I published in 23 beginning. It's called Revolutionaries. The other story of how India gained its freedom. The way India's freedom struggle is commonly told, you get the impression that it was somehow a uniquely non-violent one. So the impression you get is, we, politely asked the British to leave, and they gently left. That is unfortunately not quite the story of our freedom struggle. It is in fact extremely bloody, and there was an armed resistance to the British, which is just as important as the non-violent movement. Unfortunately, that story is not widely told, certainly not told outside India at all, but even in India, it is told in piecemeal kind of way. So what I did is, I took that story, put it together in one place, and that book, Revolutionaries, has been a super hit. It's been a huge bestseller, and Amazon Prime decided that it's a story that's worth telling, so they're turning it into a 16-part series. The first season of 8 parts is they're going to start filming it end of this month. 28th they'll start filming it, and this time next year, hopefully, you'll be able to see it. So it's a story of a lot of swashbuckling, bravery, assassination attempts, espionage, world wars, all kinds of things. So hopefully some of you will enjoy that.
It's like a day at the life of GSV. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you.